Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on when you're watching and where you're watching from. It is your girl, Marcy Thomas, here representing in my red, black, and green, and with a little bit of gold as we are leaning into Black History Month at the time of this recording. And I am really excited to be here with you for a second episode this week of the BGC Book Club. BGC Book Club is a space where we really love to share books that are by, for, and about Black women. And, sometimes there's some men in the mix, and, sometimes they're part of the stories. But this is a space that really centers Black women. And I'm super excited to have you here with me this evening. So I'm coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. And if you're in the room and don't mind letting us know where you're joining us from, please do so just so we can get an idea of who all is here to be a part of this conversation. So I am really glad to have our guests with us this evening to discuss this beautiful book. And you see I've got lots of tabs and stuff going on in here, but this is a very beautiful book, Black Voices, Inspiring and Empowering Quotes from Global Thought Leaders. And we'll get into why I love it so much, but it's just beautifully illustrated. There are a lot of great quotes and information in here, and I can't wait to really talk with Jessica and see what it was that inspired her to put this together. So our author for the evening is Jessica Ann Mitchell Aiwuyor, who is a cultural communications specialist based in Washington, D.C. area. She is the founder of the National Black Cultural Information Trust, a Pan-African initiative that uses communications, media, and cultural storytelling to share information and resources that correct and challenge cultural misinformation and disinformation surrounding racial, ethnic identity, anti-Blackness, and other false narratives. That's a big job and an important one. She, as an author and cultural storyteller, her writers about African American cultural heritage and ethnicity have been published and cited across a wide range of publications, including the Huffington Post, the Business Insider, MSNBC, LA Progressive, and TV One's News One Now. She also publishes children's books celebrating Black life and culture with her publishing company, Our Legacy Press. So there are so many other things that I could tell you about Jessica, but the most important thing is to bring her in the room and let her tell her own story. So without further delay, let's welcome Jessica to BGC Book Club. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so excited to have you here, as I mentioned.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm just thankful to be able to have this discussion with you.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And as I was saying in your introduction, there is such important work that you just do through your organization, through your writing, and all of that. But this here, Black Voices, is such a powerful book. So, first of all, congratulations, because it hasn't even been out a month yet, has it?
Thank you. Yeah, it hasn't. We're getting to the end of the first month. It came out officially on January the 2nd.
Yes. Wow, that's exciting. So, started off the new year right, so to speak.
Yes.
Yes. So, what was it that made you want to put together such a beautiful volume? I mean, it's wonderfully illustrated. I'll share some of those as we go through it, but the illustrations, the quotes, the just the snippets of Black history. What was it that made you want to pull this volume together?
Ironically, it is my dream book, but it wasn't my idea.
Wow.
So over the last couple of years, I tried to get more acclimated with newer social media platforms, and I started
Mhm.
posting Black History TikToks. And I had a series called Fake Black History where I debunked myths about Black history. And a couple of those, quite a bit of those videos went viral, getting millions of views. And then I was contacted by a publisher. Um,
Mm.
I was contacted by Quarto Publishing Group, and the editor there said, "Hey, we have a book idea, and we think you would be perfect for it." And we got on the phone, and they explained to me this idea for Black Voices, and I said, "Of course, I definitely want to
Wow. Mhm.
take this opportunity, and this is a book pretty much of my dreams."
Wow, wow. And see, and that just says something there, do the work and the people will come, or as the Bible says, your gifts will make room for you.
Amen.
Just thinking about that, because to think you're creating TikToks or whatever and going viral and then get a book deal out of that. Because the thing about TikTok, it is going to have a lifespan as social media and digital things tend to, but this book is going to last forever. So I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. So in doing that and putting it together, you were looking at thought leaders, both dead and alive, from across the African diaspora. So what was that process like, and even figuring out who to put in it, or the research? How did you come up to the 60 plus people that are featured here? How did you determine what people you were going to include in the book?
It was a very tedious process. Surprisingly, it sounds simple, like, oh, you just get some quotes and it's very tedious. It takes, especially because this is a Pan-Africanist project. So we wanted to make sure that it was as expansive and inclusive as possible, including folks from across the Pan-African world, African descendants everywhere and on the continent. And so I was even researching people that I did not know before,
Wow.
trying to make sure that I cover all the different topics and bring in voices that I learned, and share them with a new audience. And then on top of that, realizing that there's a whole background process to doing one of these types of books, where I really gathered more than the quotes that are here, actually probably double the amount.
Okay.
But there's a copyright issue and permissions. So for every
Mm,
single quote, we have to get permission from either the person or the publisher or the platform where those words were spoken or written or published. And if you can't get the permission, then they can't go in the book. So if you look at the very end of the book, there's
mhm.
a list of permissions. It's a list of, yes, it's so gorgeous, and that's another thing I will touch on. But
Yes.
there's a list of people included, but also a list of permissions and where the quotes came from. And
Mhm.
so the only quotes that we don't have to get copyright permission for are those that are outside of the copyright law dates, because there's a certain time period where something goes out of
Right.
copyright and it can be used in public domain. And then other quotes that are by politicians, let's say they're in government, like Ayanna Presley, and she gives a speech, then
Right.
then well, I think I had to get permission because that was what her quote was in a newspaper in an interview.
Gotcha.
But like Kamala Harris and Ketanji Brown and Barack Obama don't need to get specific copyright permissions, because those are kind of public domain because they were operating as a government official.
Mm.
Include whatever they say as a government official in their capacity, in their work capacity, as public domain. So it's very tedious.
Wow, it sounds like it's a lot.
It is, and then writing the biographies of each person is
Right.
tedious, and making sure that it's accurate. I did have help. I had a wonderful research assistant, Remy Johnson, that helped me with that, who also attended grad school with me at Syracuse in the Pan African Studies department. And then Quarto also helped with outreach on getting the permissions. And sometimes I would even have to get the permissions myself by sending a letter and requesting it. And so it's a tedious process.
Wow.
I didn't even get all the quotes I wanted in there because of that.
Mhm.
Also, there may be translation issues. I wanted to include more Afro Brazilians and wasn't able to get some of the translation stuff settled, so I couldn't get it in the book in time. So if I ever get a second edition, I know I got to start early. But yeah,
Right.
it's tedious. It's a very tedious process, but it's also a very loving process, because these words to me that I'm trying to present to the world are tender, because they're meant to um, educate, but inspire us for today and for future generations.
And it absolutely does that. That's why I have so many things marked in here. just because I was being inspired, I was learning, because how can I put it? There's certain quotes that we see or we hear, especially as we're leaning into Black History Month. And then, of course, BGC Book Club is a place that centers women's voices. We got Women's History Month coming right behind it. But what I love is that there are names that I knew, some are quotes that I was familiar with, but there are a lot of things that I was not. So that's what makes it so powerful. Now, before we start getting into some of the layout of the book and some of the areas where you have quotes, I do want to talk about the art because it's not just, I was showing it to a coworker earlier today and she said, "Oh, that looks like a nice coffee table book." I'm like, "Yeah, it is." So, it's kind of, because of the light, it's kind of hard to see, but it's beautifully illustrated throughout. Some that look like paintings of people, or photos of, well, more so paintings of people, and then some of it's just the graphics or things that look like African prints and things of that nature. So, what was that process of finding artisans to kind of add to the book? Because otherwise, it would just been a book full of words. And so, what was that process like, finding people to do the artwork?
Thankfully, the publisher played a very big role in that. And because they knew that I was really trying to do this Pan Africanist project, they sought out and got Black artists from around the world to include their art within the book. And then I was able to look at the book and say what I liked, and um, see how it coordinated together. And I loved the overall process. Some of the artists that I wanted, and just for everyone to know, the book is broken up into 11 chapters, and each chapter you're going to see a beautiful image of Black art as you
Mm.
go into the next chapter, and then there's print on each page that's different and colorful. Some of the artists are Afen Segun, Eric Robinson, Giles Maek Navan. I'm messing up names just like a lot of people often mess up my name. Giles Maek Navanji, Nicole Colley, Rendani, Nemakavani, Uzo, Njoku. So these are just various artists from across the Pan African world, and I'm so thankful to be able to include their art in the book because it really does make it come to life with all the vibrancy.
It definitely does. It definitely does. Because I'll admit, I have some books that are just quotes, but this is going to be one that I would put out on the table and like go to and, and do the research and things like that. So, as you mentioned, you have like 11 chapters within it, which include like a nice introduction. And then you also get into have quotes as well as, just a little bit of historical background about the different people. So, as we talked about before, I want to get into it a little bit, some of the areas. So, the book starts out talking about culture and history. So, what was it that led that to be where were your starting point, so to speak?
Well, I view culture and history as our foundation. I view it as our root, from which we grow. So much about Black life is our culture, is our history, is our heritage, is our stories. And I wanted to start the book out from that framework, which is why the very first quote in the book is Alfonso Schomburg, of which the Schomburg Center in New York City is named after.
Mm-hmm.
Afro Puerto Rican scholar who really uh, salvaged uh, and maintained and uplifted African American history and culture, so much so he became a mentor of Dr. John Henrik Clark, who's the second person who's quoted in the book. So I always view Black life, number one, from the framework of our culture and our history, because I think those are the shoulders on which we stand.
Absolutely. And culture just shows up in so many different ways, the way we dress, the way we eat, how we move, art, our music, so many things. So I love that. And history taps into all of that as well. So did you have something you wanted to share from that section? Because I have one, but we can kind of tag team.
Oh, you can go ahead. I'd love to see what you spotlight.
Okay. Now, once again, because there are men and women in the book, but this being a space that celebrates women, I kind of leaned there. So the very first one that I picked, and this was from page 15, is the quote from Mary McLeod Bethune. It says,
Hmm.
"For I am my mother's daughter, and the drums of Africa still beat in my heart. They will not let me rest while there is a single Negro boy or girl without a chance to prove his worth."
Yes, I love me some Mary McLeod Bethune. What a lot of people don't know about her is that she wanted to be a missionary to be a teacher in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
But the white people that she was under as a missionary didn't want to send a black woman to Africa, didn't want to fund her to be a missionary.
Wow.
And so she had this love for Africa and her ancestors in her heart. And that is part of the inspiration, like she said here, what the drums of Africa beat in her heart. She wanted to make sure that black children in America had an opportunity at life, and she knew it was through education to be able
Mm-hmm.
to uplift future generations. And so I wanted to highlight that specific quote because it does really have a lot to do with her life mission and work.
Mm-hmm. And it's just so important, especially as we think about the things that are happening nowadays, where they're trying to take our history away, whitewashing it if it's being shared at all. So it's just important to remember that, there are people who fought hard to make sure that we could learn, and not just book learning, or the things that our colonizers might want us to know when they wanted us to know anything, but that's a whole nother conversation. But also just to be able to have that connection to who we are as a people. So I love that, and that you featured her. It actually kind of segues into the next section. Now, everybody, we're probably not going to get through all of them because, as she says, 11 sections, and a lot of conversation that we can have. But where you do talk about education and knowledge, so there was a point that you made in that introduction where we talk about like a formalized education, but then the education that we get outside of formal means. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, what inspired me to think about education through that framework was I had a mentor. Her name was Dr. Mishari Gathai Mugo. She was a Kenyan scholar. She passed away actually last year.
Sorry.
Um, and she had written various articles about education, the Gikuyu way. And she talked about how education was a communal process. It was a sitting around and listening to the elders tell stories and the children soaking it up. Oftentimes, that is minimized as a form of education, but it is education.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many different ways that we're educated from people all around our community. It doesn't necessarily, education isn't always just in a classroom. It isn't always the professional way that
Right.
we look at it, where we're sitting, at a desk and have a pen and paper. We're learning from the world around us, but most importantly, we're learning in a communal setting. And when she taught us that, from her perspective as a Kenyan woman and a Pan Africanist, it made me think about the ways in which African Americans used to learn from each other, sitting around in a campfire, secretly teaching each other how to read, stealing away, and people learning how to read from the Bible, and all of these different types of communal learning mechanisms. So education takes on so many different forms, and a lot of times it does have a lot to do with our cultural heritage and background.
Yes, and that is just so powerful to you to point that out, because I'm thinking like the griots who would share stories and information, or like I was talking to my mom yesterday about, people who might have been herbalists, or things like that, people who knew things that could teach you how to work the land, so, or what things that you would need if you had a sore foot, what herbs and things could you put together to
Yeah.
put on your foot so your foot didn't hurt anymore, or whatever. So yes, there is this education and things that we learn that go outside of quote unquote book learning, and I love that the way that you pose that in the book. But the quote that I have, and I'm probably going to say the name wrong, it's on page 37. Miser Githai Mugo.
Yeah, that's my professor, Mishari Gathai Mugo.
Okay, see, thank you. So I picked her and not even making the connection. But the quote that says, "The African orator heritage connects me to my African indigenous sites of knowledge, where I learn stories, myths, legends, riddles, proverbs, poems, and songs, etc., that remind me that our mothers, grandmothers, and aunties are some of our most treasured gifts as educators and artists." So yeah.
Yes, and she taught extensively about what is called African orature, which
Mm-hmm.
is pretty much what it sounds like. It's the oral aspects of learning that is passed along through storytelling.
So yeah, so I picked that one and not even making the
Yeah.
connection. So we're on the same page. Now, you also have an area where you talk about justice, civil, and human rights. So just a little tidbit about what that chapter dives into, and I'll let you pick one for that one because I realized
Okay.
I didn't pick one from that one.
Let me look at what page I'm on. Okay, here we are. I'll go and see which one. I may have picked one from that chapter already, but let me try to get there. While I'm looking for that spot, the inspiration behind this chapter is, of course, as people that have been through the transatlantic slave trade, also known as the Great Ma'afa, um, gone through chattel slavery, gone through colonialism. Um, we have always been, since we've endured these crimes against humanity, fighting for our justice, civil and human rights. And we've been fighting on different fronts and in different ways using various mechanisms. And so that's where the inspiration from for this chapter came from.
Yeah, I realize I do have one, but yeah,
Okay.
I'll let you go.
Okay, so I was gonna highlight Ida B. Wells, the famous African American journalist. She says, if this work can contribute in any way toward proving this, and at the same time arouse the conscience of the American people to a demand for justice to every citizen and punishment by law for the lawless, I shall feel I have done my race a service. And what
Mm,
she's talking about, Ida B. Wells was documenting lynchings
right.
extensively, and a lot of times they were not um, documented in mainstream media. They would often be documented in Black newspapers, circulated through uh, Black articles and journalists like Ida B. Wells. And so she was doing this as a not just to tell the story, which is important, but to try to save lives and to try to invoke something in the consciousness of American society to show this is not right, and that my race of people deserve justice and deserve to be protected um, eh, throughout the law and otherwise.
Mhm.
So that was one of the inspirations behind including that quote.
Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing. And actually, you can't see her because she's too far back, but I have the Ida B. Wells doll. She's sitting over my shoulder back there.
Awesome.
I'm sure Ida approves.
Yes.
Yes, they honored her with a Barbie a few years ago, so I had to have her back there looking over us. So thank you for that. Yes. So the next section you talk about race and racism, and of course we know what that is. because we deal with it, recently. Those who may have read Caste or seen the movie Origin, we see that racism, caste, all of these things are things that kind of serve to quote unquote keep certain people in their place. So, what was it in particular that you wanted to highlight through the quotes in that section of the book?
Oh, let me see. um, Let me see. I think I want to highlight Benjamin Banneker
Okay.
because we often think of Benjamin Banneker in the terms of an inventor and mathematician, but he was also an abolitionist and was fighting for justice for people of African descent that were enslaved and or dealing with various forms of oppression. So this is a quote from him. Sir, I freely and cheerfully acknowledge that I am of the African race, and in that color which is natural to them of the deepest dye. And it is under a sense of the most profound gratitude to the supreme ruler of the universe that I now confess to you that I am not under the state of tyrannical thraldom and inhumane captivity to which too many of my brethren are doomed, but that I have abundantly tasted of the fruition of those blessings which proceed from the free and unequaled liberty with which you are favored, and which I hope you will willingly allow you have received from the immediate hand of that being from whom proceedeth every good and perfect gift. So he's writing a letter
Mm-hmm.
to try to remind, and oh my gosh, I really don't want to mess up who he wrote this letter to. Oh, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson. It's right there in the book. He wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson. He's highlighting that, I'm not enslaved, but so many of my brethren are enslaved. I've tasted freedom, and you have gotten that freedom from our supreme ruler as I have gotten mine from our supreme ruler and being, which is God.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you not letting my brethren go free? Basically, like in this correspondence, he's advocating for abolition of slavery. He is advocating for the freedom of African Americans. So we often highlight him as an inventor, but
Mm-hmm.
please know that in his intelligence, he's not just inventing all these marvelous things and being an astronomer and all this. He's saying, in speaking truth to power at a time where that is dangerous, he's
Right.
saying, I'm free, but that's not enough. That's
Mm-hmm.
not enough. I want my brethren to be free. And telling it straight to Thomas Jefferson.
There's power in that because as you're saying it, I'm thinking he was a person who had the ear of people in power.
Hmm.
And how important it is for those who whatever means who have the ear of people who have the ability to affect change, to be able to, as you say, speak truth to power, to talk about the things, to have the difficult conversations, to make people aware, because I think people tend to operate in their own little world and they don't think about what really could be happening with others.
Hmm.
But to say that and to express that humanity, so I think that was powerful that he did that, and also that you shared it. And actually, it kind of goes along with the one that I chose, and I'm probably going to say the name wrong. This is a current day person, page 59, Farai Chidea.
Yeah, Farai Chidea. Hmm.
Her quote: "The first step in resolving some of the tension between the races in this country is to talk about those issues honestly. Racism unexamined will always be racism unresolved."
Yes. And Pariah Chidea is an amazing journalist that wrote a book on cultural misinformation about African Americans that I believe came out either in the late 90s or early 2000s. I can't remember the exact date of publication, but I would
Mhm.
highly recommend that book. It busts a lot of the myths that we're still hearing about African Americans, the negative myths that are being perpetrated and stated towards us. And so I would recommend anyone to read that book because it really is relevant to the attacks the African American community is enduring right now on our history and on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, I found it because it's right here. The book is Don't Believe the Hype, Fighting Cultural Misinformation About African Americans, and it came out in 1995.
Mhm.
So, yes. And while before I go on to the next thing, I did want to mention because I know that in the work that you do, you work towards, busting myths basically, misinformation and disinformation. So for those who might not know the difference, what is the difference between misinformation and disinformation?
So there's misinformation is information that is shared that is incorrect, but the person didn't do it on purpose.
Okay.
So it's like you hear a story about something that occurred and you share the story incorrectly, or you heard it incorrectly, or whatever, and that becomes information that is shared. If it wasn't intentional information, it's
Got it.
incorrect, but it wasn't done maliciously. Disinformation is the intentional spreading of false information, often for nefarious purposes. And right now, the African American community is being targeted with that. Not just through there's digital blackface with people pretending to be black and spreading stuff. There's
Mm,
even now there's been a lot of coverage recently of AI and
mhm.
people using Oprah's image to make these fake videos,
Wow.
either to sell something or to spread a false message. There was a recently, I believe, in New Hampshire, a fake AI Joe Biden voice robocall, um, trying to tell people false information. So this is serious. This is very serious because a lot of this has to do with Black voter suppression, and um, it can go over into like vaccines and what people think about that. It's all kinds of things. Um, and then there's another type which is malinformation.
Okay.
And malinformation is like I tell you something that has truth to it, but I do it maliciously for a nefarious reason and I spin it. Like I could spin something that is a possible truth or
Mhm.
has truth to it. But even with dis, and malinformation, all take nuggets of truth. All
Hmm.
of them take a nugget of truth, and then either the misinformation is just misstated, the disinformation is it takes something that's true and then adds a bunch of falsehoods to it, and then malinformation takes nuggets, takes truth, and uses it for various reasons that are often not for the benefit of overall society.
Wow. So, we have to be more careful and more diligent about, not just hearing things and, taking sound bites or whatever and taking things and running with the things that we hear, based upon what you were saying. Just do the work. I mean, Google is our friend, but even be mindful of the resources that you're using, even if you're going to Google. So, thank you so much for breaking that down because I think people don't know it, as Jean said, that the two terms are used interchangeably. People don't really know. They don't understand it. Like I said, a lot of times folks will take things at face value. Like it's on the internet, so it must be true. Like,
Mhm.
not necessarily.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah. So thank you for that. So one of the chapters that I really love, of course, I love them all. Just share this photo right quick. And it is the chapter where you talk about gender, feminism, and womanism. So, of course, we know that Black women do a lot to hold our communities together across the diaspora. So, what was it specifically that you really wanted to bring out in this section as a celebration of our Black sisters from across the globe?
Oh, I just wanted to showcase, our thoughts, our feelings, our perspectives on womanhood. As we were speaking earlier, I'm from Middle Georgia, and Alice Walker's from Eatonton. I used to live in Eatonton, and The Color Purple had a profound effect on me growing up watching that. And I did see the musical with my mother, and I loved it.
Yes.
But I think it's about our struggle and fight for human rights, but it's also about who we are as full and whole human beings, and how we feel and how we experience life and how we triumph or how we fail or how we, you know, breathe new lives into ourselves. It's just so much into Black womanhood that this definitely had to be included, and I just tried to share an array of thoughts and feelings and voices.
So, is there a particular person you'd like to share from that section? I have some, but is there
Oh, go
somebody?
ahead. I would love to see what popped out to you.
Let me see. Which one do I want to do? I will start with Anna Julia Cooper. It says the position of woman in society determines the vital elements of its regeneration and progress, that of society. So, what was it about that quote that stood out to you?
Anna Julia Cooper was a leading Black woman scholar, educator, and she was always trying to instill in us that as women, as Black women, we had power. She was the voice of the South. You know, we're not just here to sit and look pretty. And even though, we do want some of the soft life,
Right, right.
we have a voice, and it should be heard.
Mhm.
And whenever we have our own thoughts and feelings and beliefs, it should be heard, and often specifically for the purpose of changing society for the betterment of overall society, but so that our lives can be better.
And it's true because when white, I'm sorry, not white, when Black women are able to move ahead, move forward, it moves things ahead for everybody, really, because oftentimes, unfortunately, we are at the bottom of the totem pole. Or as Zorro said, Dornell Hurston, Black women are the mule of the world. There is some truth to that, even though we might not like to hear it, might not want to accept it, but there are people who truly believe that and treat us in such a way. So the other one I had, it kind of piggybacks on that, and this is from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. It says it has taken 232 years and 115 prior appointments for a Black woman to be selected to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. But we've made it. We made it. All of us. All of us. So, what was it about that quote that resonated with you?
I think it resonated that we have a Supreme Court justice named Katanji.
Who has
Okay,
hair like yours?
exactly. And I think that she takes her role very seriously. Her work speaks for itself. And she knows what it has taken to get to that position. She knows the shoulders that she stands on. She knows that she is a representation of not just herself, but the sisterhood, the collective. And that is what she was saying here. And I think that that is often a theme in Black girlhood and womanhood, that we know we in this together. Even
Mhm.
if, we might hate each other one day, love each other tomorrow, we in this thing together.
Right.
Black women, if we don't fight for each other or support each other, we're not gonna make it. And
Mhm.
that's how we have survived
Right.
these over 400 years of uh, oppression, enduring transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, Jim Crow, etc. So many stories, beautiful stories of Black women connecting together, embracing each other, as a survival mechanism, but also a way of communal self love.
Absolutely, because we do better when we are in community, and that's the people that we come from.
Mhm.
It's all about community and working together and serving one another. And, globally, that's who we are. Historically, that's who we are. And, we live in a space here in America where it's a lot of individualism. And there's nothing wrong with individualism because, hey, I'll admit I got some individualistic tendencies. Of course, because there is a such thing as self-care and self-preservation, but there are also things that we really can only really tap into in a communal space. So that's part of what a Brown Girl Collective is about. Creating communal space.
Yes, and I do appreciate the space that you have created. It's very important.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So now we're getting close to time, believe it or not. I knew we weren't gonna get through
Oh
everything.
wow.
But because we are going into not only Black History Month, but Black love, all of that, you do have a chapter where you talk about peace and love. And I'm a flower person, so I really like this painting right here.
Yes, beautiful.
With those flowers, I love it. I love it. And that was by Uzo Njoku. The
Yes.
Flower Man is what it's called. I
Mhm.
love that.
Beautiful.
So, why did you have to include love and peace in this book?
Oh, because our lives, I don't want to make blackness all about doom and gloom and struggle, even though that's what we deal with a lot. I wanted to showcase love. I wanted to showcase peace and the ways in which we've thought about it, from various thought leaders, how we have tackled the embrace of love, either from for ourselves or from others. So I definitely wanted to include that.
Right. And not just, the love, romantic love, but also familial love,
Mhm.
communal love,
Yes.
all of that, how you have those friends that become family,
Oh, yes.
or your sorors or your church members or your neighbors or whatever, that really tapping into that, so I could appreciate it. One of the quotes is from Bell Hooks, and we love who Bell Hooks, the late great Bell Hooks. I'm very interested in what does it mean for us to cultivate together community that allows for risk, the risk of knowing someone outside your own boundaries, the risk that is love. There is no love that does not involve risk.
Mhm. Yeah. Bell Hooks had that whole beautiful book on love.
Mm-hmm.
And it really changed my perspective on a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, love is a risk, and sometimes um, you can be afraid to open up. And I think that that's a wonderful part of our story is
Mm-hmm.
that through everything that we've experienced, we've kept our hearts, minds, and souls open for love. One of the most profound stories I ever heard was of learning about what happened after emancipation
Mm-hmm.
and how African Americans from across the country were writing letters into newspapers to look for their lost loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
Husbands seeking wives saying, I think her name is Anna and I think she was taken to Alabama, or have you seen her? Give me a heads up. And uh, so it was just all those letters. There's a whole book on it. I can't remember the name, but through all of that, people were very, uh, very in tuned with needing to maintain that familial, communal, and personal love, and not giving up on it,
Mm-hmm.
not letting that be something that is permanently taken away. I remember attending an event where an elder was talking about how she's basically the offspring of something like that, Her
Mm.
mother, either her great great grandmother had been sold off, and
Mhm.
she was married at the time, and she was sold away into a different state. And after emancipation, she was alone. She remarried because she thought she would never see her husband again. And this husband looked and searched for that woman, walked across multiple states until he found her.
Mm.
He found her with a new husband and children. And he said, "Hey, look, man, I know y'all are married, but that was my wife first, and I
Right?
want her back, and I'll even raise these children that you had with her as my own." And
Mm.
the new husband gave the man his. She went back to her first husband. I don't want to
Wow.
say gave her back like she's property, but she did
Right.
go to her first husband. He raised those children, and
Wow.
he had new children with her. And the elder that told the story is a descendant of that union.
Wow. Now that's a story right
That is
there.
a story that need to be the next. You remember the Notebook? That need to be,
Right.
you know.
Right.
But that is a story. I can't remember that woman's name, but she told this story at an event, and it was just breathtaking.
Wow, that gives me chills because man, out here
I
nowadays
know.
it's a different world like the TV show. I just lost the earring. I knew that would happen eventually. But yeah, I mean, just to think about that people loved one another and it was that level of commitment that you would do that, go search for that woman first of all, and then okay, she got another man, so what? Okay, she's coming back with me, and I'll take your kids too. If you want to come by and say holla at them, whatever. But that's my woman.
That's yep.
Wow. Yeah. So, but I mean, thank you for sharing that because we need to hear things like that because there's always something negative about what didn't happen or what isn't happening. But to understand and realize that, there is a such thing as people really loving one another and making those commitments to one another that are lasting. And that's a really great story. That's a really great story. Well, we might have one or two more sections we can look at real quick before we wrap up. But I do want to talk about inspiration, hope, and perseverance. So we got a suggestion for you, Jessica. You should pitch that to the Obama's production company.
Okay. I definitely think that would be a good thing to do. I hope
Okay,
that
good
woman
story.
don't
I
sue
mean,
me
it
for
really would be.
that.
It really
It is
would be.
a good story though.
You have to find that lady.
Hmm.
But inspiration, hope, and perseverance. What is it that we need to know about that from your book?
That we are always looking for ways and creating ways to be inspired, to always have hope. And this has also been a way for us to survive, and not just survive, but to build thriving communities.
Mm,
Um, Black people, we are so creative, and I think that's what makes our lives so vibrant, like our cultures so vibrant. And
mm,
I think that also helps us to be able to always reinvent ourselves and
mhm.
continue to be inspired even in the face of adversity. And so that for me is the inspiration behind that chapter.
And I love that because we do need to be inspired. I think for me personally, it's one of the things I love about doing this, doing what I do, having these conversations, all that Brown Collective has been over the years as it has evolved and, done different things over the years. And there's more evolution to come. Side note, Brown Girl Collective will be 15 in July, y'all. Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. So, but it's always been at the heart of it has been a thing to really be a source of inspiration because there are, when we talk about media and, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, that's a new word for me today. I have to remember that. But, there's so much that would discourage us or to
Mhm.
keep us, doubting ourselves or questioning ourselves. So when we can like go through a book like this, or just some of the different stories, it's just so empowering to really think about who we are, the possibilities of, where we've been, who we are now, and the possibilities of who we can be in the future. So I love that. So, and someone saying, Rachel, I made it just in time for the awesome love story post emancipation. I look forward to reading the book. Thank you, Mark. Jessica. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Hand claps. Yes. So, yes, and so that's inspiration. Let's see, freedom and liberation. Black people, we always want, freedom is the thing, no matter where you are, because colonialism has impacted us across the diaspora. But the ability to be free is important. So, what was it that you wanted to really touch on in that area?
I mean, I think you just hit it. We want our freedom. And there were so many. One of the original sins, one of the original crimes against humanity was the attempt to strip away our peoplehood, to make
Mm-hmm.
us no longer human beings, to make us no longer a part of the human family, and thereby say we are fit only to be enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always rejected that notion, and always fought against it, because it is innate for us to want to be free and have our liberation. So every single time any system tries to um, render us the permanently oppressed, we fight against it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that is part of the inspiration behind this chapter. And we fight against it in different ways. We use our
Right.
creativity, we use our collective activism, we use our spirituality. So it's many different functions behind that.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything in particular you wanted? Any particular quote? Because I have one. If you don't,
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I know you said you wanted to see what I picked.
Yes.
And this is Ayo Tometi. She's a Nigerian American activist and a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. Says we can't stop until we all get free. And we know that we can't get free until Black Lives Matter. And I know that we were all created to be alive in this time period for this specific work, no matter where we are, no matter your location. You have a set of experiences and gifts that we all need in order for us to get free.
Yes, that's definitely where my mindset is with this chapter. We come from all different backgrounds. Like I was saying earlier with Benjamin Banneker, no one would think that, oh, he was writing letters to Thomas Jefferson telling him, we can all have our different use our different gifts as a part of this movement or the ongoing movements for freedom. Another source of inspiration for that was the founding of the AME Church and the Free African Society, and how back in the 1700s they were using different mechanisms for freedom and liberation for African people and people of African descent. So that's part of the inspiration there.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, these last two, I'm going to go kind of quick because it's two
Okay.
more I definitely think we need to touch on. One is Blackness and just what it means to be Black. How do you define what Blackness means in this particular chapter?
I think it's very interesting because I go back and forth. I've heard people say that Blackness is more so a cultural thing. I've heard people talk about Blackness solely in the framework of um, color, but I think it's a combination of both. I think it's being an African descendant, being identifiably black, and sometimes then folks aren't identifiably black, but are of African descent and are of our culture. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they are also included in the Blackness identity. And I think that there's just so many different ways to look at how we have been racialized and how that has been used against us, but also how we have flipped it
Yes.
Because black used to be a bad thing. But then we said,
Right.
well, I'm black and I'm proud.
That's
You
right.
know, and it got flipped, and now black and blackness is a source of pride. So there goes that creativity again.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's part of the framework for that.
Yes, and black is beautiful. I actually have a mug that says that, but I don't have it with me right now. One of the quotes from here, and this is actually from someone who lived from 1803 to 1879, Maria W. Stewart. The quote that I pulled, selected, it is not the color of the skin that makes the man or the woman, but the principle formed in the soul. Brilliant wit will shine, come from whence it will, and genius and talent will not hide the brightness of his luster. I'm like, go ahead, talk that talk in the
Yes,
1800s.
ma'am.
Yes. And she was a reformer, lecturer, and abolitionist.
Yes. And I
So,
and I, I wanted to uplift that voice because again, we think a lot of times our ancestors were super quiet and not outspoken, and they most definitely were.
mm,
Most definitely were outspoken and always highlighting who we were as a people and uplifting that.
mhm. All right. And last but not least, Pan Africanism. For those who don't know what that is, you've been talking about it this whole time. And I love this
Yes.
book for that. It's kind of hard to see from far away, but it's beautiful. So what does Pan-Africanism mean to you in the context of telling these, I'm calling them stories, even though they're quotes, but there's stories behind it. Why was it important for you to kind of put it in a bow, and wrap it up with Pan-Africanism?
Because I would like to highlight the interconnectedness among people of African descent around the world. We come from various nationalities, various cultures. We speak different languages, but there is an interconnectedness to us. Many of us forget that um, as descendants of West and Central Africans, we have literal blood cousins in Trinidad. And I'm talking about African Americans. We have blood cousins in Trinidad, in Brazil, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Jamaica, all over the world.
Mm,
We are interconnected in so many various ways. We do have our differences, but
right.
we have our overall communities that intersect and interconnect in various ways. And oftentimes it has been through Pan Africanism that we've been able to have successful movements, either nationally or internationally, that uplift the collective of Black people everywhere.
Yeah, and I love that. And for those who saw, I already mentioned it to you, but for those who watched last Wednesday, we talked a lot about that. And if you did not, I would suggest you go back and watch the show from last Wednesday where we talked about Imagine Freedom, Transforming Pain and into Political Power, Political and Spiritual Power by Rahel Tesfamariam, because she talks a lot about Pan-Africanism. So, y'all already tried to make sure I hook these two up because they are on to something and they really could do some great work together in DC area and beyond. So yeah, I just think that's important because whether it's the food or nowadays a lot of people are listening to the Afro beats or like me, this isn't an African design, but it's African inspired, all of that there are certain things that if you meet someone from another culture that's Black, there are going to be certain little things that, or like one of the first pictures in the book where the girl is having her hair braided. Like we all do that. You know what I mean? No matter where you are, or put the beads on them, or whatever the case may be. There are things that no matter where we landed in this world, that are things that hold us, dear, endear us to one another because we are all from one big tribe, basically. So I love that. And I want to share this quote. This is a current day person that some of you all may be following on social media. I know that I do. It's from Dr. Tiffany Pogue, also known as Tell 'em Tip Told You. And she has the
Yes.
quote in the book, and it was befitting. It says, if we trace our lineages, we will find each other, and the only other people that benefit from us remaining lost to the rest of our family are the ones who are currently oppressing both sides of the family. Think
Yep.
about that.
Amen. And Tiffany, I love Dr. Pogue. I went to school with her and learned a
Ah,
lot from her when we were at Fort Valley State University, which is a HBCU in Georgia. So, yes, I love Dr. Pogue.
yeah, so that is the book. That's a really quick overview because, of course, there's so much more. All the beautiful photos. There are the word's not coming to me now, but you have like little historical blurbs about each one of the people that you have quotes about. You have the information so people can do more research or find where you got the information from. So it's a very rich volume, as you can see on my little tabs. And everything. It's very rich, and it's something that, now that I've read it and been introduced to some new people, I'm inspired to go and learn more about the people that I didn't know things about. So that's a takeaway for me. But for you as the author, Jessica, what is it that you really want people to take away from Black Voices?
I want people to be inspired. I want people to really soak up the creativity and the love and everything that went into the book and everything that went into the voices that we are depending on to gain this inspiration and knowledge. And I would love for people to go to my organization's website. We're doing a year-long book tour starting in the DMV. If you go to nbcit.org/Black Voices, there those are the different events that we'll be at. You could possibly sign up and get a signed copy.
All right, that sounds good. Now, speaking of that tour, are there any places that you will be physically that people can come out and see you? Because people watch from all around. I think on one of my shows the other night, somebody said they were watching from South Africa. I was like, all right. But where are some places that you might be in the weeks and months ahead that people can be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so on February the 10th, I'm going to be at Hegelay Pan African Soul Restaurant, which is in Washington, D.C. That's Saturday, 6:30 p.m. The RSVP link is on that page, nbcit.org/Black Voices. Then I have another book signing event in Waldorf, Maryland, that's on there. And I'll be at the Association for the Study of African American Life and Histories Black History Month book luncheon in DC, and I'll be at the Virginia Black History Month gala. Also on both of those are on February the 24th. And then later on in the year, I'm going to be in Houston for the National Black Book Festival, and other dates throughout the year are going to be added. So there's a whole list on that website. And so a lot of these will be in person.
All right, that sounds good. And then, of course, as it's been scrolling the entire time, you can follow Jessica in all of the spaces where she shows up on social, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, so you can add to those millions and millions of people that she has. And then, of course, on X/Twitter, I still call it Twitter, girl. But and then, of course, the website. So those are ways to find out about some of the work that she's doing, and there are links to other things from those spaces as well. So Jessica, I thank you so much. I was so thrilled to have you here as we get prepared to lead into Black History Month. And by the way, it's a leap year, so we get an extra day to celebrate Black people this year. How about that? How about that? So I'm really excited that you were here because this is a good entryway into starting the month off and being able to really dive into some of the Black voices that made history and are currently making history right now as we speak. So thank you again. And thank you to those of you who are in the room, whether you came in late or been here the whole time. You are appreciated. Please go out and snag a copy of this beautiful book. It is available at the Brown Girl Collective Bookstore, which is at www.browngirlcollectivebookstore.com. That does tie to bookshop. So if you go there and you're like, well, wait a minute, It's bookshop, but I just have a way to send you directly there. You can find Jessica's book as well as many of the others that we have featured or will be featuring there. So, Jessica, I'm gonna put you on hold for just a hot second, and then, but don't hang up because I want to say goodbye. But thank you again for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to share. And I look forward to all, volume 2 and everything else that's to come.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So hold on one second. All right, everyone. That was wonderful. I am so glad that I had a chance to talk to Jessica. And I didn't say this when we were live, but I believe she can still hear me. We have a mutual friend by the name of Kim Lett. So that's how I first discovered and, we started to make the connection. So, hey, Kim, if you're watching, thank you for, being in the right places at the right times and, just having those great relationships that allow us to link up with wonderful people like Jessica. So I don't have the book in front of me right now, but for a week from today, we will be talking to Cole Arthur Riley, author of Black Liturgies. So she will be here to discuss Black Liturgies, which is her latest book, and that's also a website or social media page that a lot of people follow for inspiration and just to be motivated and to get our minds right and all those sorts of things. So she will be here with us next week, same time, same station, to talk about Black liturgies. So thank you to everyone for your time and your energy. We could feel it while we were here having the conversation, just having your feedback and all of that. It is greatly appreciated. And I just ask that you go ahead and grab a copy of Black Voices because it's an important work. Share it with others, share this video with others so they can get the introduction as well. And we look forward to seeing you again here real soon. So take good care. Bye-bye.